is what flows in this fam's DNA. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to Dope Interviews, brought to you by the Mighty 19 Media Group. I'm your host, Warren Shaw, and it's good vibes only, as always, here on Dope Interviews. And we're talking a little more football in the virtual building. I have the 12-time Emmy Award-winning supervising producer and showrunner for NFL Icons, streaming on MGM Plus, my guy, Paul Camarata. Paul, what's good, family? How are we doing this morning?
All good, Warren. Great to be here. Thanks for taking a few minutes to talk NFL Icons with us.
And this is exciting time. I know this is the third season of that show, right? But before we get into that, in Dope Interviews, we got to let the people know a little bit about you as the guest. Yes, we're here to promote, what the work is, but how do we get to know a little bit more about you? So, Paul, tell me where your sports fandom came from in general, and how'd you get involved with kind of maybe the NFL as one of your first loves?
Wow. So, I don't remember a time of not being a sports fan. My earliest memories grew up in upstate New York. So I had the good fortune of, when I was 6 years old, right around the time maybe you start noticing and remembering, the Giants won the Super Bowl, the Mets won the World Series. So those became my first loves. And then a couple years after that, I became a Notre Dame football fan. They were at a high point right around then. And in '88, they won the championship, of course, and had a great run under Lou Holtz for that era. So those are my probably first three loves. And then that sort of intersected with another first love I had, which was writing. I always liked to write stories, draw pictures. It was something I loved to do as a kid. And so my dream was to basically work at Sports Illustrated, and kind of just wrote for fun. Always wrote in school, of course. We all had to do that. And then had the good fortune after college to be hired here at NFL Films. So I've been here 21 years, and really learned the craft of filmmaking here. The luck was that they were very keen on hiring folks who had football love and knowledge and writing, storytelling interest. And they didn't particularly care if we were filmmakers. They said, we're going to teach you how to make films the way we've been learning and perfecting it for the last 30, 40 years at the time. It's going on 60 some odd years at this point. So yeah, got to films right out of school, got to work with some really at the foot of some of the masters in this industry. And here I am now, still telling stories 21 years later.
No, that's pretty amazing, Paul. And so did you play sports also growing up as well too? Did you play everything, try everything at least?
I tried everything. I wasn't much of an athlete. I wouldn't take much credit for that. But yeah, definitely was always out playing with my friends and watching, and like I would just watch games and then I would write game stories as if I was sitting in a press box. It just was it was just fun. It was just the thing that I did and how I really experienced sports probably the most as a kid. And cutting out pictures and making collages, and I don't know, I look back now and go, maybe I was training to make films and I didn't even know it. And I like to think that way, but at the time it was just loving sports, talking sports, watching sports all the time. That was the thing to do.
Well, Paul, there are jobs, then there are cool jobs, and then there are dream jobs. Would you say that you've landed in your dream job at NFL Films?
Yeah, I think the opportunities looked and the excitement was there at the beginning, and I was even naive to how cool they were going to be in terms of, yes, you were coming to work for the NFL and working in football. Yes, you were getting paid to literally watch football all day and think about football. And, we joke the conversations that sometimes we have, in the hallway. For other people, they might, in other professions and other offices, it might be like, all right, stop talking about football and go back to work. Whereas like here, it's like, no, that's us working right now. Us watching a football game, us watching movies. That was sort of the two charges when we first started. The president of the company at the time, Steve Sable, one of the founders, obviously he and his dad, Ed Sable, both Pro Football Hall of Famers now, founded the company. And they used to say, the two best things you can do to be good at this job is to watch football on Sundays and watch movies, because you will learn how to tell stories, how to think visually, how to use scripts, how to use music. And of course you'll be dialed into the world of pro football and all the great characters and conflicts and stories that entails on a day-to-day basis. So that's a pretty fun mission to have as your charge when you come to work every day. And then again, over the years, you meet people, you get to go places, you develop relationships, and then everything just kind of gets enhanced because we're fortunate to really not just in the athletes and the coaches and the people in the organizations, but even just the filmmakers here, or the audio mixers, or the music composers, or the cinematographers. You get to meet people that are the best in the world at what they do. And I mean, that's a pretty cool opportunity to when you walk in the office every day.
Paul, you touched on something that I'd be remiss if I didn't at least ask the question while we're at least on this topic here right now, right? So getting to watch movies, right? So two-part question, one a little bit fun, and then I'm probably a little bit more serious in terms of, your methodology, so to speak. What types of movies did you watch, and then what's your favorite sports movie of all time?
Great question. Boy, I my knee jerk is I have to say, I don't know if it's a favorite because there's probably a lot of favorites. Well, Rocky is one of my favorite movies of all time. So that's a sports movie. Classic. Obviously, Rudy, being a Notre Dame alum and fan as a small kid, pulls on the heartstrings still to this day. Field of Dreams. I have a poster up here in my office right now. Field of Dreams. I remember being an 8-9-year-old kid watching that for the first time, playing Little League baseball, and when that movie came out, and that being just a magical movie. So I guess, then of course, I mean, it's the classics. It's Caddyshack. Anything where, and what's funny about those movies too, when you think about them, they are sports movies, but they're so much more. And so I think that you hope that seeps into the work where you're telling stories in a sports universe, but you're hopefully telling human stories, or you're telling stories about, we say, like, you tell a story about a head coach. I've done this a couple times. You end up telling a story about a guy raising his family, or a marriage, or just the elements that are part of these people's lives that really are hopefully are universal and can resonate with people of all types.
Paul, you touched on something there too, that when you get into this space, right, and especially where we are now in terms of the world, it is about those deeper rooted stories, right? And I want to kind of get into that. I'm going to put a pin in that here too, but that's a really great point, and I don't want to forget that. I think as we kind of transition into the MGM Plus side of things and the NFL Icon show, what made you have the impetus to create this show, and then kind of how did it get to MGM Plus?
So we've had this great relationship with MGM Plus going on five plus years now. Mm-hmm. They used to be Epics on premium cable, and then they rebranded MGM Plus. So in the Epics days, the first couple of years, we did a show for them called NFL The Grind. And it was a really fun weekly show. We were in season, and we would take former players, the likes of Charles Woodson, Ed Reed, Jerome Bettis, and we would turn them into correspondents, and they would go to games every week and report on the stories through the lens of a player who had lived it. We did that for a couple of years, had a great run, and then MGM came to us and said, we still want to work with you guys. We want something that's a little more evergreen. That's not that we think has a reach that transcends just the season. How about some kind of salute or exploration or capture of the greats of the game from a larger historical perspective, as opposed to in season topical. So we kind of put our heads together here, and we came up with icons. And what we love about it is, every icon in the 20 episodes, we're on season 3. We finished our 20th episode this year. They're all names you've heard if you're a football fan. Even if you're not a huge football fan, you've heard of some of these guys because they are the bigger names. This series was an opportunity because of MGM's really the platform they gave us, the space they give us, and they really, I got to say, I feel like they have an admiration for the history as it was documented over the years in the archives. Mm-hmm. They saw the value in what NFL Films and the Sables and all their teams over the years have been capturing, going back more than 60 years. So they said, come up with a show where we can celebrate these guys, but really peel back layers that even though they're familiar faces and voices we haven't heard or seen before. So what it let us do is go back into those archives and dig into things we've never done. Show material we've shot that's never seen the light of day. Show stuff. Of course, there's always the classic moments, but what are the things that the look of a guy? Show his interview that you did the first time he sat down with NFL Films and he was 22. And of course, because these were great players, they're the type of people we were shooting interviews with maybe sometimes every 3-4 years. So we have these history of these people getting older on screen. Their voices change, their hairstyles change, their fashion changes. You really get to see the evolution of a person through the archives. And then, of course, there are some posthumous episodes. Jim Brown kicks off our season this week on Saturday night for season 3, but a lot of the icons are still with us. So when we do a fresh interview, again, presumably they're later in life than obviously the last time we interviewed them, we get to ask them some of those similar questions and get a new reflection. It's almost often the old head look back on something that they were doing at 22 or 32 or 42 or all of those things. And again, you go back to a Charles Woodson revisiting the tuck rule, which we've asked him about that before,
Sure.
but how does it infiltrate his daily life at this stage in his life? And he said, yeah, I can't go to the grocery store without somebody yelling out something about the tuck rule. It's part of who I've become. So it's MGM's opportunity and interest and great partnership to give us this space, but let us explore and lean on the strength of the capture. We say these films are new films, but they're really 50, 60 years in the making because of how we've been shooting them for all this time, and we have this great opportunity to put the new material together.
We're chatting with Paul Camarata over at NFL Films, producer of NFL Icons on MGM Plus. Make sure you follow them at NFL Films. You follow my guy Paul here at Tweed Typewriter. Love that name, by the way. At X, sorry, I keep saying Twitter, but X now. X, right? And make sure you use the hashtag NFL Icons. Paul, let's get into a little bit what you just touched on here, right? So is that the gift and the curse of it in terms of like how hard it is to retell some of these stories that a lot of people already know, but tell it in a different way? Is that part of just again how hard it is, but kind of like the fun challenge and also doing that story as well too? Does it kind of like the gift and the curse?
Definitely it is fun. I mean, it's making a jigsaw puzzle, but you're getting to make every piece along the way, and also the final portrait. I think these guys are also acclaimed. They have so many accolades. A lot of them have adversity. There's a lot of big ups and downs, but again, what makes someone an icon? And it's usually the reach that they attain. The levels of, again, highs and lows that they endure and that they learn from and they use to influence others. So we try and find those really big things and really give as much depth to the big moments and not feel, you can always sort of pack in the necessary information and get through it in a quick way to just remind you the info you need along the way. But how can we live with a guy's highest high or his lowest low long enough to peel back layers that people can learn from? Again, hopefully he gives us something new about what he's taken from that experience. So that's always fun. And again, the show, we were, the creative team here was able to kind of put together a style of a show, which also was a fun thing to do. So again, using the look of Mike Singletary over decades where he's wearing all these different eyeglasses, and you're going to see that. And we created this split screen style where we show different faces of an individual and what they sounded like. And we're able to sort of bring them to life, we think, from different eras, which is sort of a cool filmmaking challenge that we have in this series. So it's definitely a challenge, but again, it's a fun one. It's like, that's what we're here for. That's what we do.
Paul, what goes into the selection of an icon? So this season, it's Jim Brown, Bill Cowher, Mike Singletary, Chris Woodson, right? So as you alluded to, the NFL is just storied history. Amazing individuals who've played and impacted the game at various levels. How do you all go about the selection of an icon specifically for your series on MGM Plus?
I think there's always there's a few factors. There's no one specific formula. In the case of Jim Brown, obviously passed away in the spring. So it sort of brought him back up to mind. Like, gee, we haven't done a Jim Brown show yet. Certainly his story is certainly worthy of it. There was a topical element in his passing, unfortunately, but also in the fact that the NFL had just renamed the running back award that they give out at honors every year for Jim Brown. So it kind of was a reminder, like, he was top of mind is really the best way to put it, that we haven't done this story in this style. There's an opportunity to dig into it in a new way. Jim Brown, let's do it. Same thing with John Madden, honestly, the year before in season 2. He had just passed, and we said the celebration of him is bringing new things to life. That happens with the posthumous, but also, what happens in that regard with the posthumous also happens with the folks who are still living. Sometimes we've done a film on these guys, but it was 10 years ago. Well, when you're an icon, you keep living, you keep doing, you keep accomplishing, you keep building. Sure. And sometimes there's new story. Sometimes a guy, Bill Cowher wasn't in the Hall of Fame the last time we did a lengthy film at him here at Film. So it gave us a new layer to peel back and to ask him about and to help him have him reflect on. Charles Woodson, he's got this remarkable football resume. The last defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy, among other things, Super Bowl champ, college national champ. The guy has contributed more money and effort to the C.S. Mott Children's Hospital, the University of Michigan, than maybe as much as anybody. And the point being, he talked about it in the interview, for everything I've done, boy, wouldn't it be amazing if when I'm not here anymore, 100 years from now, my resume includes this guy contributed to an effort to cure cancer or some other disease. So again, you get this new perspective when you sit back and reflect on who are sort of the usual suspects, so to speak, who are the big names that we're always talking about, who are always percolating in our conversations as football storytellers, and maybe something new has happened that we feel like this is really worthy of digging into and presenting in a new light.
So let me pick up on that aspect from Charles Woodson, because I think as a storyteller, showrunner, a person who does film, creative, if you will, and interacting with all these great and amazing athletes, you've been around the game here now a little while. We're talking off air, hey, you've been in the sports business and the NFL business for a very long time. What about this season, and with these individuals that you covered, is there anything that surprised you anecdotally? You're like, oh my God, I just didn't even realize that, because, hey, you're familiar with all of these guys as well, too. What, if anything, surprised you in a good way, funny way, that you could potentially share with us here on Dope Interviews?
I think every episode surprises me. When you dig into these guys, it's like taking a college class on one subject. Like if you take a class on one author or on one artist or on one war, right? You get into some levels of detail and analysis that you don't get at sort of the 100 level of like your high school version of it, right? It really is like that. So you become I oversee all 4 of the episodes, and then there's episode producers for each chapter. But I get to sort of seep in the research with them as we are figuring out how we're going to put the show together, what we need to unearth here, what we need to dig for out in the world. Jim Brown, I knew, again, obviously had the sense of what a great football player he was. He is equally, if not more, an icon in the American civil rights movement of the 20th century, and certainly in his work in Hollywood. Here's a guy that he's an icon for the things he did, but for how he influenced other icons, the likes of Paul Brown, maybe the greatest coach ever, Raquel Welch, the famous actress. Again, Ali. Here's a guy that's influencing Muhammad Ali's journey as he's trying to make these historic milestone seismic choices and decisions and actions back in the 60s. So I think you get a greater understanding when you get into those details about who these people were and really what separates them, right? It's not just that he was a groundbreaking football player. It's that he led this whole other life. He's a guy that's really worthy of 3 or 4 films when you get into how each act of his life had such reach and profound influence.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Paul, really and truly, because, I always say this in some of the writing I've done previously, no one person is any one thing, right? And I think, to truly be able to tell the story, you need to kind of even go back, I think, as you have been here too. Let me ask you this question here, right? So can there be anything such as like an underrated icon? Or is there, I know you're in season 3 of this year right now, but again, we talked about how many great NFL personalities and characters there have been throughout the course of the time, but is there any semblance of an underrated icon, somebody that you'd like to cover maybe in future seasons?
Boy, there's so many, because the process has taught me so much about what opportunity exists. Again, even with familiar names, there's no end to the
right.
The guys that I'd like to apply the icons treatment to. Even if you only kept it at the NFL Hall of Famers, you could go on for quite a while. And I would say there's, a guy like Don Meredith is not in the Hall of Fame. I'd love to make an icon film about him. I mean, a groundbreaker, again, as a college player, as a foundational Dallas Cowboy in broadcasting on Monday Night Football. There are, again, this world of football is vast. And so there's a lot of great, and then we haven't talked about coaches to a great degree.
Yep.
Coaches as teachers, as leaders of organizations, as really profound daily changers of lives, become icons in the reach that they create with the people that they come in contact with. So, yeah, I mean, I got more names than I could list here of who we'd like to do shows about.
Makes perfect sense. And I think, and as an avid fan and somebody that's connected with you, you couldn't even just call out one, you might get in trouble, Paul. So we don't want to do that as well too, right? Keep all your options open here for MJ and Plus. Paul, last couple ones before I let you get out of here. What has been the feedback from fans, the icons themselves, and people who kind of have taken in the series thus far?
We've gotten great feedback. Again, the fact that we've gotten to do more season. We started with season 1 and we're on season 3. So I'll count that as a win. And, I think different elements of the process, you get positive feedback, even in the interview chair. There's been moments where we've shown folks images of themselves that they haven't seen in 30, 40 years, whether it's from a first interview. There's a moment in the Bill Cowher show this season where just to sidebar a little bit, our former president of the company, Steve Sable, used to keep these 3x5 index cards with all of his notes on whoever. And he would put newspaper clippings, back in the day, and he's got boxes of them. They're still here. And so when he had to do research on someone, he would go back into his own notes that he's always keeping on a daily basis. Well, we used not just that story in the Cowher show. We had a moment where we took some of those cards with Sable's handwriting about Cowher and let Cowher read them on camera to get his reaction. Because again, the journey that they've been on being documented becomes part of the story sometimes. And how many times a guy like Steve had done interviews with Bill and his daughters and his whole family. And that's part of the Cowher film, is sort of the growing up of the Cowher family. So we really wanted to hang a lantern on how the process had been captured along the way. And, again, that's to your question, seeing Cowher react to that. And he had a positive reaction. And I think it helped stir up his emotions and his nostalgia for the relationship and for the journey he'd been on. So, that's always great feedback that sort of keeps the wheels turning about what's the next version of that? How can we continue to inspire these guys to connect with the camera and with the audience?
Paul, last one before I let you get out of here. If you could sum up the show, the series, kind of in one sentence, and could you do that? And what do you want fans and viewers to kind of be left with after they've seen these shows? Yeah,
I'm going to lean back on a phrase I already used for the lack of just being redundant. They really are fresh football films 50 years in the making. I mean, if you think about a movie that you took that long to make, you would say, well, geez, that's going to have some depth and things I've never seen. That's what these are. So while you recognize the names and say, oh, I know about Bill Cowher, I know about Charles Woodson, I would say in every episode, you're going to see something or hear something that you have not seen before, simply by virtue of how comprehensive, how much time was spent. Again, how many people have been shooting these interviews and telling these stories and at games. I mean, the amount of game footage and just the faces and how their bodies have changed, or how their mannerisms changed, whether it's in pregame or postgame, how Bill Cowher gave speeches to his college team. Then, 40 years later, he's giving speeches on the eve of the Super Bowl to try and bring one back to Pittsburgh. So I think know that there's going to be something fresh in these movies, because we do it every day and we find new material every time we dig in.
Paul, thank you so much. Excellent conversation. He is Paul Camarata. Be sure to watch the new season of NFL Icons on MGM Plus, debuting here on October 21st. Catch up on previous seasons as well on that same platform. Make sure you follow him at NFL Films or Tweet Typewriter. Make sure you hashtag as well too at NFL Icons. I am Warren Shaw. You can follow me at Shaw Sports NBA or Dope_interviews. I want to thank Paul and the great MGM Plus for this access here and for this great interview. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. I thank you so much for joining us. And as always, to our fans and listeners, you know what it is. It's been another dope interview, and we're out.
Together we stand, divided we never. The vision is one, striving for the better. Working as a team, working toward a dream. It's not even work when the team is the dream. On a united front, we got our own back. A band of brothers to counteract any attack. One heart in fact, forget what the blood say. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA. So let's do it for the love, give to the max. Listen to opinion, but react to facts. And remember that together with a shh, but separate, just pieces of it. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA.
Family represent like a tree with names on it. We're free, no chains on it. Relieved, the pain's gone, I can see. We come together like questions on the quiz. Mojo Flow and Viz, man, you know what it is. And if ignorance is bliss, you're gonna hate this lesson. Organized intellect like a tropical depression. My symbol is the cross, a mic and ghost peppers. Cause I'm just a black sheep growing up to be a shepherd. Moonlighting as a weapon to protect the children. Every brother is a father, dynasties we're building. Max, J and K, Bay, and Isaiah, next level of the family foundation. Understand me?